Welcome back to the Peak Property Performance Podcast. It's me, your host, Drew Hall, along with Bill Douglas hosting as well. Welcome, Bill.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm going to read the introductions for these two gentlemen before we welcome them. Today on the Peak Property Performance Podcast, we're joined by Micah Green, founder and CEO of Talos. He's a Thiel Fellow and a Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur, reshaping how automation shows up in the built environment. Micah spent the last decade building robotics that gives teams back their time, not replacing people, but amplifying them. His work sits right at the intersection of AI, labor, and operational efficiency, and it points directly to where buildings are heading. We're also joined by Joe Tagliente. Did I get that right?
Well done.
There we go. First time I said it like that. Managing partner of Tage Capital Partners. Joe brings a sharp owner-operator lens to this conversation about NOI, valuation, and how technology actually performs inside a portfolio, and his perspective as a technology investor. So together, we're going to talk about robotics, automation, and the digital infrastructure that allows owners to drive real ROI within their assets. So Micah and Joe, welcome to the show. We're really happy to have you here today.
Thanks for having us, Bill and Drew. Thank you for having us. And Micah, it's always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
It is. It's great.
Yeah. All right. Hey, guys, let's start off with talking about automation as a labor strategy. So in industries, particularly those that are squeezed by labor shortages, how are robotics filling operational gaps today?
I'm going to let the expert answer that.
Okay. I can
That's fair,
going
yeah.
to see if you wanted to jump in first. So yeah, I think starting with the data could be really helpful. So you mentioned labor shortages. There's now a few million open positions just in the US alone, and that covers hospitality and real estate as a whole when you look at cleaning all the way to the F&B side. So also, F&B at restaurants, things like that. So that's a huge problem. The other side of it is the retention piece as well. So in housekeeping, there's cases where turnover can be up to 140% year over year. And that means if you have 10 housekeepers on site, all 10 may leave within the same year. And then 4 of their replacements actually leave within the same year. So that's what people are dealing with. So I think from my perspective, it's not even a matter of, the type of solution. I mean, of course, there's a lot of different ways to cut that, but operators are desperate. And Joe will be able to speak to this better than I can. But in terms of filling those voids and filling those gaps, and how do you even get the job done? And then how do you get that job done sustainably? And that's where robotics have come into play, where you can have some pretty cost-effective ways, like our robots, for example, $2.40 an hour versus in certain markets could be upwards of $30, $35 an hour. But even if you can find and retain the person in the first place. So,
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, you said F&B. Is it the same turnover there? And for the listeners, F&B stands for food and beverage. There's a lot of acronyms in this industry, so we're just trying to explain them. Is it the same 140% in F&B as it is in hospitality?
So I'm more versed on the housekeeping, but Joe, what have you seen in F&B?
The short answer, Bill, is yes, but it certainly depends on the platform for the F&B. I mean, in a quick serve restaurant, certainly higher intensity, lower wages, more turnover. If you go to a place like a French Laundry, chances are the majority of their staff sticks around for a long time. They're very well paid, they're excellent tips. So, it's a different situation on a case by case scenario.
I was specifically talking about F&B inside of hospitality, like the food and beverage piece of hotel operations.
Yeah. Well, the food and beverage piece in hotel operations is challenging as well. Not as challenging as the housekeeping piece. Housekeepers are, the thing is about, if you look at the hotel industry, it goes by segments. So you can have everything from a 5-star Ritz-Carlton all the way down to a Motel 6, which is, a 2-star limited, 1 or 2-star limited service property. The one thing though, the two elements of operation that both of those types of properties have in common is front desk and housekeeping. Okay. And somebody would say, well, maintenance too, Joe. Like, okay, maintenance. So front desk, housekeeping, and maintenance. But the most critical element is the housekeeping, because they are producing the inventory. They're creating inventory that gets sold every night. And those people who are housekeepers, they are literally worth their weight in gold, because if they do a wonderful job and they show up every day and they perform, you have the ability to operate a really great hotel. If they don't, you're struggling the whole time. And it's hard work, thankless work, and doesn't pay very well. And that is why you have the 140% turnover.
Yeah, exactly. That's the 140%. Okay. Mm-hmm. Sorry for the interjection, but thank you for the clarity.
No, thank you for interjecting.
Yeah. Well, can I interject?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
it's a conversation.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think the other factor is that when you look at the industry right now, especially the hospitality hotel side, ADR, so the average daily rates, has been steady or going down in many cases, depending on the market. And like Joe said, depending on the scale of hotel too. So you're now in this position where wages have gone up, whether it's to attract more talent or because of market conditions or, laws and regulatory, but then revenue is staying steady or even going down. And a lot of properties are forecasting next year to be even worse, unfortunately.
Mm.
So in those situations, going back to your question or point, Drew, I think how do you create a sustainable, profitable operation where everybody can win and you can deliver that product of, a clean room? And that's where people have become much more creative and are somewhat forced to now adopt new technologies, whether it's, AI tools, software, apps, and robotics to be able to help kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah, that's good. Well, so are there specific robotic applications that translate from hospitality into those commercial real estate spaces, office, multifamily, industrial? I mean, some might be more obvious than others.
Yeah, for sure. So cleaning for sure transcends, hospitality, and it's different, right? Because it's a key part of every single room. But then when you look at an office space, for example, it's a key part of the operation to keep that office space functional as well, all the way to multifamily, senior living, airports, even. So I'm just kind of rattling off some of the verticals that we've deployed into. In terms of other applications, you just think about these different tasks. So there's bathroom cleaning is another kind of use case. We're focused on more of the floor cleaning and vacuuming space, but there's bathroom cleaning, there's delivery. So moving things from point A to point B, whether that's people or objects or, food or things like that is another one. And then there is security is another one that we've seen as well.
Interesting. Yeah. Give me some information there about security. Like what types of, you're talking about physical security?
Yeah. So it's essentially you have a mobile robot that's able to kind of provide surveillance in a mobile way.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing, the model there is you actually still have a human in the loop, but rather than having one person or a few people dedicated to one specific building, you could actually have the robots driving around and collecting this data, which I think is a big point, all the data that these robots can collect, and we'll come back to that. But you can have somebody sitting in an office who is responsible for 20 buildings because the robot will detect anomalies as it relates to, people that shouldn't be there or bags or things like that. So it's really cool how you can then, you still have somebody, you still have a human, right? But you're making them more efficient.
I've seen a lot of those come out in the market in the past year and a half. You see them at trade shows and things, and they're not taking the form of robots on wheels. They actually look like dogs, so they can step over things and go up and down steps. I mean, they're four-legged creatures, that have the gyroscope in them, and all they're doing is collecting data. They're not trying to mimic a dog for the purpose of looking like a dog, but they needed to get over things that wheels couldn't, especially robotic wheels. And it was fascinating to me. They are walking data collectors. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We could have used some automation yesterday. We were picking up some butter braids for a school fundraiser for one of my kiddos, and the complete wrong inventory was handed off to him. So instead of like 3 things that he had sold, it was like 30 things that they had handed him. He's just chugging along with all these boxes. And so we ended up having to go back and do a lot of returns and stuff. And so as you can imagine, someone else had come to pick up their mass quantity that they had done a great job of selling. So it's like, man, sure could have used some automation out here on the lawn today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was a 100% human process there at the high school. All right.
Yeah.
Well, so fighting the urge for sure so far, because you've thrown out data twice, Micah, right? I know we're
Yep.
coming to that, but real quickly before we do, I mean, it's, the same as owning your data gives you leverage that we talk about all the time. You've got that leverage when you own your data. In the same way, automating those repetitive tasks, it strategically frees up the human capital for other work, like you've said. So last question in this category, as automation becomes part of the workforce, how should owners think differently about the labor?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and definitely curious, Joe, for your take on this too. I think we can change the model completely in terms of how people operate. So in office cleaning, for example, there's a concept called team clean, where you have somebody who's dedicated to bathrooms, somebody who's dedicated to vacuuming, somebody who's dedicated to, maybe windows or surfaces or things like that. In hotels, you've traditionally had like room attendants who do everything. What we've seen in certain properties, I mean, you still have that. And we're primarily focused in public space right now, has been kind of the bread and butter, no pun intended, what you shared. But with that in mind, you really can start to have somebody who potentially is dedicated to deploying the robots and works alongside people who are doing the bathrooms or who are making the beds. We've seen in our case, there's a house person who's more public space cleaning. focused. They can actually strip beds faster and deliver linens faster, and even potentially take the trash out of these guest rooms in the hotels. And you're changing their role slightly because they're also now robot operators. They drop the robot, let it loose while they're doing these other things. And now the room attendant
Mhm.
can become 10 to 20% more efficient because they have a little bit extra support. So it's a shift in that model of like, how are things getting cleaned in the first place? And then really going back, I think, in terms of, I think maybe Bill, you mentioned the whole like not replacing, but really supplementing or supporting. You still have humans in the loop. And that's actually how we've designed our robots. You still need somebody to make the beds and do other things. So that's key. It's just, how can you reallocate their time better, right? And how can they do a deeper clean or do things sooner than they would have otherwise, or ultimately create those efficiencies where maybe there's less overtime and things like that. So I'd say, because I'm probably not answering your question perfectly, but it depends on the model, whether it's, that reallocation of labor, or, so they're now starting to do more tasks or things sooner, or you're starting to reduce, overtime and labor hours. And Joe, curious from your standpoint, what you see as the opportunities there.
The opportunities as it has to do with robotics in hotel operations specifically is, certainly the application that you're designing, you're building and continue to have built at Talos, Micah. So it is. So to give you guys a little bit of background of between my relationship with Micah, he was a student at Cornell. And I was an entrepreneur in residence at Cornell, and I was up there guest lecturing. And so they were having a pizza party to get to know the students. And I said, asked Micah, what were you, a freshman at the time or a sophomore at the time?
Yeah, freshman. Yeah.
Very early on, and so I'm asking all students, what are you planning on doing when you get out of Cornell? And Micah said, I want to build a company. I want to launch a company that builds robots that clean hotel rooms. And I gave him my card, and I said, if you ever do that, you're going to become, successfully do that, you're going to become a very wealthy man. And I know, because I operated hotels, and housekeepers are the biggest challenge there is. If you decide to do that, here's my card, give me a call, and when you're ready to launch, I'll help you raise money and so forth. So 6 months later, he called me, he goes, Joe, we're ready to go. And
6
now
months, wow.
and he
Exactly 6 months.
he recruited a team of 3 hotel school students, 3 Cornell engineers, and 2 NASA robotics scientists. And they opened a little skunk works in downtown Ithaca and started working on a prototype. And now they're in Austin, and they're doing brilliantly now. But the thing is the point of it being is that my pain, I was sharing with him the pain that I had experienced having built and operated hotels, and that is, not having enough housekeepers is always a challenge. And I don't care if you have, a big downtown New York City unionized hotel with they're making $30 an hour and full benefits and so forth. Even they have, difficulty having people show up and so forth. Maybe not as much as, a non-union hotel or something to that effect, but still difficult because it's hard work.
Sure.
It's predominantly women. They get arthritis in their back and their hips. It's repetitive. It's mind-numbingly repetitive. You pull the sheets, you pull the trash, you make the bed, you vacuum, you tidy, on to the next one. I mean, and so, it's mind-numbingly repetitive, and it's very, very important. And so, when you have somebody like Micah and his team that can create a solution that can, aid those people, enhance the people who do it by taking some of the repetitive stuff out of it, making the tendency to be injured, or making them more efficient, or making them able to do more rooms or do fewer rooms and do them faster. However they can be enhanced by the technology is always a beneficial thing for sure.
Well, let's shift to talk about the turning physical workflows into digital workflows. So either one of you gentlemen, what foundational digital infrastructure is required to deploy your robotics at scale? Like within this facility, when you show up, what do you need to make your robots work inside of that hotel or office building?
So I think in many cases, the industry standard is a lot of, integrations potentially with different systems, with elevators, for example, which kind of bridges between physical and digital. different, software platforms that these operators are using. But to like kind of cut to the chase for us, we want it to be seamless where you don't need to change any infrastructure at all. So really the answer is nothing. I say that with kind of a caveat where we do connect to Wi-Fi so that the robots can collect data and can transmit that data pretty consistently to both the customers and to us. And then we can send software updates to the robots just like your phone would get, every month or week or whatever it might be. So really for us, it's Wi-Fi, which isn't even required to operate the units. And then we are investigating ways to integrate with some of these tools, like in hospitality, there's hot sauce and things like that, where you can track kind of the labor and tickets and stuff like that. But I think the challenge for roboticists is how do you do it in a way that doesn't require infrastructure changes, because that can be very costly and take a lot of time and be a headache. So,
Well, we're big proponents of the property should own its digital infrastructure, and that may or may not include Wi-Fi for all areas, but it should at least be, in common areas. So how would a project like yours be challenged or, God forbid, fail? If a building does have fragmented networks or poor data architecture, like how would you do it if it couldn't connect to anything? I'm not advocating somebody go spend all the money, $1.50 a foot to put in Wi-Fi or DAS in a building. How would they be able to do this in a retrofit application, class B plus, class A minus property that may or may not have Wi-Fi throughout the floor?
yeah, we face that. And we also face like security issues where certain properties are like, you are not connecting to our Wi-Fi. Like, yeah, just set up a hidden SSID network and here's all our architecture and it's fine.
But you and Drew
Look at all
could
these
geek out
companies.
about that because that's what we do for all our clients all the time. It piggyback
Okay.
smart
Yeah.
locks and robots and all that, and the
Yep.
tenants don't even see it. It just works.
Yeah. Okay.
But
That sounds
let's
like we
talk
have
about
a good.
this instance where it doesn't. What would you do then?
So what we did is we added cellular connectivity to our robots. So every robot has 5G capabilities. Now the downside to that is the downloads, the software updates are so big that it's really slow or hard to transmit those just through cellular.
Those are small
But
chipsets, right? Like,
yeah, and we want to limit, right? There's a pretty scalable cost that comes with that. So that's what we've seen. And then just creating really good documentation to convince people otherwise. But also
Yes.
the robots don't require Wi-Fi to operate. So
okay. Well, from a practical perspective, what steps should a commercial real estate owner take to prepare their asset for mobile autonomy of robots and other? Like, what would you recommend if
yeah.
somebody was willing to look forward and be proactive about what they will need?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing really is the Wi-Fi, honestly. So just having what we typically do is we'll ask the properties to whitelist the MAC addresses of our robots, or if that's not the right thing, they may create a hidden SSID network and then we can kind of set that up manually. But that's really the big thing from our perspective, at least. The other side, some robots, like just speaking more holistically, do require elevator integrations. I think there needs to be some sort of fight for more freeness in terms of access to elevators, because it can cost up to 50 grand a property just to integrate with the elevators. I mean, you have the oligarchy of the elevator companies.
Are they charging
Um,
that for APIs or the separate integrations, or who's getting that money? The elevator vendor is charging the actual property owner? Is that
yeah,
that's absurd because it's their
it's not
elevator and it's
scalable,
their
but
data.
yeah, no, it's the
Wow.
elevator companies are
Well, we
still
also
charging
see
that
that
as
in
taking
property
that off.
management software. We see that in the big property management. I mean,
Yeah.
market-facing lease management type, tenant management platforms, they're charging an inordinate amount, but the market pressure is bringing some of that number down. I don't know that it's to zero yet on that side, but we're not an advocate of that at all. It's the client's
Yeah.
data and it's the client's system. They should have access to it.
Right. Totally agree. And on the property management side, I think that's really interesting. Or like there's different software tools. So I think that would be another question for owners, operators is, what tools would you want to connect the data to from, let's say, the robots as an example? Like we have an open API that we can set up for customers that have other tools where they want the robot data to go into. So just sharing information on like the APIs from those tools and what their requirements would be from a data perspective.
There we go. Talking about the data again. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. Well, and we're starting to get into now the dollars and cents of it, the real ROI, the impacts on NOI, CapEx, even valuation. And so, I mean, we talk about this as well in the overall peak property performance ecosystem. When buildings operate with precision, the predictability goes up, as we talked about, and the value goes up as well. So talk us through some of the measurable financial impacts that robotics is delivering in these spaces so far.
Yeah, it's really nice you bring up the NOI and those points, because I think, at least from my standpoint, I focus more on the like just OpEx savings, or, the raw savings, but there's a whole domino effect that comes from that. So I think from what we've seen, there could be an impact as it relates to the just operating expenses. You could save, some properties could save 20K up to, let's say, 200K or even more, depending. It scales kind of in conjunction with how many robots and, the size of the property and things like that. And then with a cap rate of, I don't know what number you'd want to use, but if we were to say maybe 5% or 8%, you can start to scale that up and do the math pretty quickly. And now we're starting to articulate that even in ROI figures. So bottom line is, like, the average we see is 2 to 4x ROI. Basically, like, you are saving 2 to 4x of the cost of the robots in terms of raw dollar savings, like on the P&L. And then, could multiply that out by 10 to 20x. But yeah, what cap rate do you think is appropriate? I guess it depends on the market and property.
I think
Class.
your 5 to 8
Yeah.
window is pretty accurate, like
Yeah.
depending on the asset,
Yeah.
where it is, and the type and the class. Yeah.
I think if it was a multifamily, maybe a 6 cap would work great. And if you're in a hospitality, maybe a 7.5 cap perhaps. Either way, if you're getting 2 to 4x the cost of the robot, you're doing great,
Yeah. Because that income turns into, 15 to 20 times asset value. And asset value increase. I mean, your dollar turns into $20 or down to $15 in
Yeah.
asset value. Yeah. Okay.
Well, if you ever put anything into CapEx and, you get a 20% return, or you say, okay, we're going to get a payback on this in 5 years, you'll be somewhat enthused. Like, okay, good. I'll get my money back. All right. You're investing in this technology and you're getting 2x to 4x back.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why wouldn't you do this?
That yield
I
is
know
tremendous. Yeah. That's a very high yield.
it's like, Joe, thanks for the sales plug, but I mean,
No, Joe, Drew has seen this too. We have done proposals where the client will come back and say that I don't believe the yield is too high.
Yes.
So they'll actually tell you to raise the price because they can't justify this. Like, but the price is fine. Just it's a higher yield than your new countertop or your new carpet or your new facade. Much higher
Right.
yield. Digital infrastructure has a much higher yield, and robots are
That's-
part of that digital infrastructure.
That's exactly right. And I don't want to speak for Micah, but I'm going to say, if you look how technology works, the more ubiquitous it becomes, the price tends to drop. It gets more affordable, and so that 2x or 4x could be even greater going down the road. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, if we
And
look
then-
at go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, so that's like the labor savings, but then we keep teasing data. I know we talked about it at a high level, but just to go there, there's so much opportunity in terms of value for data too. Our first property that we ever deployed at was a Marriott property in Houston, and their biggest complaint from guests was the Wi-Fi signal strength. They said guests complain about it all the time. Can you help us identify where there's bad Wi-Fi so we can deal with it proactively? So we were like, yeah, we already have that data. That was just kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of, okay, wow, this is not just a cleaning robot. This is a sensor on wheels, right? And it's
Yes,
the data.
yes.
You use that analogy with like the dogs. It's mobile data collection. So there's so much we can do both operationally and on the environmental side. How much is that worth, right? To be able to prevent guests from complaining and to be able to get ahead of that and not that property said they lost 150K a year in lost revenue because they gave free discounts and free food and drinks and things like that to guests that complained specifically about Wi-Fi. So, okay, now I can point, that's maybe 150K, or let's say we cut that down in half. So, and then we started to hear more and more, there's odor complaints because there's in Houston and, potential mold and things like that. So we've added sensors to be able to detect things like that. So I think there's a lot more value in terms of ROI, and going back to that question, beyond the actual physical labor side that these tools and robots can provide for operators.
Yeah, that's great. Measure the
Micah,
data, own the data, interpret the data, leverage the data. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
I can speak as an operator. I wasn't even aware of these new features, but Micah, those are amazing. I mean, honestly, from an operator's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge, huge headache relief.
But we like to talk all the time here on the show about how digital, maybe AI, maybe not, but just digital and technology are changing the future. So let's shift and talk about the future operator. Like, what is the biggest leadership and culture gap you see when clients adopt automation? How do early adopters, medium adopters, do you see somebody in their portfolio liking it and some not? How do you deal with change management for clients?
I think that is maybe the biggest question in terms of all of what we're talking about with automation is the people side of it, right? The adoption, the change management. So I use a simple like example question that I think differentiates between who will be successful and who won't in terms of adoption. I think you have people who ask, how do we make this work? Those are the ones that realize that it's a dual effort. We are robot providers. We provide support and SOPs. Also, can you guys hear me okay? Sorry, am I laggy?
No, it's great.
Yeah,
We
sound
hear
good.
you great.
Okay. So asking the question of, how do we make this work? It becomes a partnership. It becomes, what do we have to do? What do you have to do? This is a joint effort. And at the end of the day, we're providing the robots and the support and the SOPs and the data. But at the same time, we don't control the operations. The general manager does, or the property manager, or
Right.
community manager for multifamily, or whoever it might be. So really, it's a partnership in that. If somebody's asking the question of, will this work? That's a red flag or a yellow flag to me, because now it's focusing just on the product, which of course that's really important. This kind of assumes the product works and is reliable, right? But, and that's a question that people need to answer, but assuming that it does work and that the robot or the product is functional, how do you operationalize it? And that takes time. That really takes a lot of time. And we did some like month-to-month contracts too with customers to get the foot in the door. This is a new product, a whole new category, right? Just like, how do we make the lowest point of friction for people to adopt? But what we found is that a lot of customers in that case would run the robots once or twice, literally, and say, oh, this doesn't work. And it's like, okay, well, how many times did you run it? Who ran it? What doesn't work about it? So it's not just the product, it's the operational side of it. So in terms of culture, I think asking those questions and kind of having that mindset and realizing that it's not going to be perfect from day one. It does take time, both on our side of the product, even for new properties, even though we're deployed now in almost 300 properties, we still learn new things. We still have to iterate, but also the properties themselves, they need to iterate and work on things too. So that's why typically you won't see success until day 60 to 90, because it takes that kind of joint iteration cycle. So I think just having that mindset of like knowing that and leaning into that and agreeing with that and being engaged and working with us and communicating with us, that will be successful. And otherwise it's probably not going to work, even if it's a perfect property for the product.
Well, 60 to 90 days for success with the robot is great. The data piece is going to take even longer than that. You have to have enough of a track record to be able to draw correlations from your own data.
Yeah.
So that
Totally.
the 90 days is specific to the robotic application. The data it's collecting is going to be valuable 6 to 9 months later at the minimum. So well, I'm a huge fan of EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, but I aged out before I could qualify for YPO. I know you're a YPO guy. So from your YPO network experience and your Thiel Fellowship, like we'd like to talk about sharing leadership wins here on the show, because a lot of people are running portfolios with diverse teams all over geography and age and income and all kinds of different brackets. So can you share some wins about leading teams into the future and about how dealing with change inside your own organization?
Yeah. On the YPO note, it's all this guy's fault, who got me involved and tapped me into the network. And
it's awesome. Like I
That's
just, like
cool.
I said, I tapped out on age before I qualified to have the business in there.
Yeah.
But
And I have some friends from EO who came to the YPO who are actually in my forum now, from EO. So I know that's a great organization.
my
as well.
EO forum
So-
changed me as a man, a father, a businessman, a friend. It was very impactful in my life.
100%. Yeah. Can definitely say the same. So it's been amazing. So thank you, Joe, for the nudge.
You're
and
welcome.
for kind of nominating me in that back in the day, like 5 years ago, I think. So to answer your question, Bill, I think it's a good question. I think there's a lot of things I've learned over the years, a lot I've done well, a lot of mistakes I made. I think in terms of leading the team into the future, we are very lean. Honestly, as a company, we have about 1,000 robots deployed around the world, and we are probably the smallest robotics company in terms of like people to robot ratio.
That's
But
a
our team
compliment to the
is
leader right there. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't have to be linear. We get that challenge all the time, Micah. I understand.
yeah, yeah. And I think, agree, like the numbers don't necessarily need to be, you don't need teams of hundreds necessarily to achieve really amazing things. I think the passion that the team has, like, I think something I've learned along the way is like making sure that this is everyone's dream job, or at least like they are on the path towards their dream job. And this is a stepping stone towards that. Having that internal buy-in, like one of our core values is act like an owner. And I see that every day. And we've gone through hiring and firing and, talking to people about that, of making sure that our team acts like an owner, owns their day, owns their responsibilities, and has a big impact. And I think with that comes a lot of responsibility, which is great too. And a lot of people that want to grow and that want to learn in their careers. And we're also kind of a younger team, right? And have a whole spectrum of kind of different ages and whatnot, but generally young and learning a lot. So I don't know if there's like one specific example, but I'm just so grateful for the team of how resilient they've been, how focused they've been, and how mighty we can be even when being small, and how we use that to our advantage, how we use the fact that we work with our customers as partners, not as vendors. We work with, people to prove success and to prove value and to iterate on software for them and to, be there on site at 1 a.m. if that's what's needed for that customer, and owning the success of the entire company. And I think through a lot of trial and error and through developing like strong core values and living by those, and then of course being a role model or trying to be a role model myself in those, it's been pretty clear of who fits that and who self-selects out.
And we share that core value here. And we even jokingly take it further and say no renters. Yeah. If you're just showing
Yeah.
up to take a paycheck, you're probably not going to like our culture. We're big on accountability
Yep.
and, always finding a better way to do something, whatever that something is. So that was
Yeah, it
great.
really does.
Yeah.
It
Joe,
really
would
does
you
sound
have
like a great culture.
go ahead, Drew. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say that's exactly what I was thinking. It really does sound like a great culture.
Joe, would you have any
Thank
advice to share in that regard?
I think the thing that I have, first of all, everything that Mike had said, I absolutely agreed to. And I think through my own experience, running my own company and then advising a lot of entrepreneurs like Mike and other entrepreneurs, and and I've sat on boards of other companies, and I'm a student of business. So one of the things I've learned is that culture it's everything. I mean, it is the whole ball of wax. If you don't have a really solid cultural foundation, you will not build a great business. You
Yes.
just won't. You'll struggle, and you'll never get anywhere. And the thing is with culture, it's important in any company, but in a family company, it's even more important, because then it brings in the culture of the family that is the owner of the business. And so, one of the things that I always do is when I tell people, I go, think of it like a house. So here's the culture here's the culture of the business, and you build the strategy on top of the culture of the business, and that's how you grow a great business. Well, if you have a family business, here's the culture, and here's the family's culture that owns the business underneath there. So if you have a family that is like screwed up, they have issues, they're fighting, that business is going to crumble. And I look at companies like the Antinori family, the great wine family in Italy, 26 generations, 600 years they've been in business. They sold wine to
Wow.
Christopher Columbus. They're still in business. And you go, how did those people do that? Well, they focus on two things: culture and the product that they're producing, and then everything that has to go with that. And so, it's huge. It's the whole thing.
Yeah. Wow. Well, guys, thanks very much. This has been excellent. As you may know, maybe you don't know, at the end of every session that we have, every podcast interview that we do, we have what we call the extra floor. In the spirit of commercial real estate, we call it the extra floor. So it's just a series of 5 quick questions, short answer, as short as you want it to be, gut level responses. So here we go. Number one, what's a book or a podcast that has shaped how you think? And this is to each of you.
Well, I'll go first. Right now, I'm binging David Senra's Founders podcast. I think that's probably one of the best things you can listen to. And if you're not familiar with it, he's a fellow. He studies all the great biographies of all the great entrepreneurs, and then he does a 1-hour podcast talking about the finer points of it. And he does an excellent job.
Cool.
What came
Michael,
to
what do you
mind,
think?
there's a book called Be Here Now, which is this really interesting story about this guy who basically becomes a guru and helps kind of with the counterculture movement in the 60s, and won't get into all the details, but it's about presence and being present in the moment. And that's all there is right now, this very moment. I think personally, professionally, it's been one of the most informative books for me.
That's awesome. Now I have 2 new things to listen to. I'm a big Audible guy. So what's the best piece of career or life advice that you've ever received?
I've received and have given, it's the same piece of advice. It is marry well. That is the one decision you're going to make in your life that will absolutely determine most of your happiness and most of your misery. I'm very fortunate that I married an amazing lady. I've been married to my wife Romy for 36 years. My joke is that she won't make me a franchise player, but she keeps renewing my 1-year contract. And and you want to talk about foundations? She's built it. I mean, the foundation for our family and for everything in my life that's really wonderful. She's directly responsible for it.
Very nice.
Love that. Wow. That's how can I
I
go
was
after that? Mic drop moment right there. I
right.
actually, it's funny. The word that came to mind was love. And I think love in general, but like do what you love. And that's, spending time with the people you love. And that's something I've learned too over the years, just the importance of family first. And that is so important, but also like life is short, right? We have limited time, at least for now. So it's, how we spend our time is so important. And just, I, at least for me, like a personal goal, or my very big goal for me personally, is I want to empower people to do what they love at Talos, through robotics, family members, cousins, and really support that. So
Yeah. What's a small daily habit or ritual that makes a big difference for you?
I think for me, it has been reading, just reading biographies. So I listen to the Founders podcast, but I read, books that I really like, even if it's just for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is. And, right now 2 books I can recommend. I just finished reading this great book written by this gentleman named Colin C. Campbell. He's a serial entrepreneur. He wrote this book called I'm looking at it right now, Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat. And it's, how to be a serial entrepreneur. It's excellent. And I finished that a couple months back, and right now I'm plowing through Grind It Out by Ray Kroc. It's a story about how he built McDonald's, and the movie The Founders is based on. And it's a great book. The way the story itself, but certainly the way he writes, he's certainly has a flair in the way he speaks. So the ritual of reading has been something I've been enjoying lately.
I'm going to be texting you,
Michael,
Joe,
what do you
for
think?
some of these, some additional recommendations here. Daily ritual, I meditate, I journal, things like that. But the thing that stood out to me was every night before we go to bed, me and my wife will ask each other, what was your favorite part of today? And like without fail, we make sure, and if we're like if I'm traveling or whatever, like we will call each other and make sure. And I think it's so powerful because first of all, it connects us and it like makes us present with each other before there. But like life is crazy, and I won't get into it, but I've been dealing with some crazy stuff personally lately. And it is so grounding to have that, and positive, right? We end on this like, okay, this positive note, because there's always so much stuff and bumps along the way. So
Yeah.
we love it. Highly recommend.
What's
Yeah, that's
something you've
great.
learned to appreciate more with time?
I think time itself, Bill, special moments in time. I recently became a grandfather. So my wife and I, our granddaughter was born 20 months ago, and now she's got a little brother, and he was born a month ago. So we went from no grandkids to 2 grandkids, and my wife and I are crazy about them. And so we're a couple of Italian nonnas and papas over here, and you can imagine what that's like. And
Uh,
those are the things that are so special. Those moments, and that's what I've really come to appreciate.
Yeah, I think Joe just said, I was going to say is like the importance of time and how we allocate time and family at the end of the day. It's like, I've always been a family person, but it's so clear to me. And I tell it to the team too. I'm like, there's something going on with their family. I'm like, you go, just like go,
Yeah.
because to me, at least, it's number one.
family first.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's definitely solidly right in there with that great business culture that we were talking about. That's great. All right. Last one of the 5 here. When you're not working, what do you love to do that recharges you?
Mike, I'm going to let you go first this time.
What does not working mean? Can you laugh right now? I'm just kidding. Um, no, I exercise, and it's like a simple one. Like, I love to bike. I have this right now, so I'm a little
Oh,
stuck.
geez.
This
We
is a
got to
whole
slow you
story.
down.
But so I think just exercising, I mentioned meditation is a big thing for me, and that's very helpful to like kind of center me. Those are a couple quick examples.
Yeah.
I think the thing that probably recharges me the most, I mean, I exercise, go for walks and stuff like that, but really what recharges me is if my wife and I are like in the kitchen and we're cooking something. We love, as I mentioned, we're Italian, so we love to cook. My wife makes wonderful pizzas, and and we like to make pasta dishes. We're getting into the winter, so we're going to start getting into ossobuco season. And, it's especially on a Sunday, we got the Patriots on, or we're cooking a wonderful dinner, and they get the fire going, and you can't beat that. That reach. If I have anything on my mind, it all goes away, and everything gets cleared, and I just enjoy that time, and it's just wonderful.
For those non-Bostonian listeners, you can just substitute your favorite team when he said Patriots. All right, gentlemen, real quickly, how can our listeners contact you? I will put your contact in the show notes, but just tell us too. The best way to reach you.
Best way to reach me is through LinkedIn.
Okay.
And so Joseph Tagliente Sr., SR. So at the end.
And yeah, I would say LinkedIn's great. Micah Green. It's my name on LinkedIn, and I have a robot like Daft Punk helmet picture of me. And then through our website too, talos.com.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Micah, Joe, thank you so much for joining us today on Peak Property Performance here. It's truly been a pleasure. Great conversation. So to our listeners, we say thank you as well. As always, thanks for joining us for this. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next episode of Peak Property Performance.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.